I woke up to the sound of a single, sharp howl, the kind of sound that doesn't echo, it sticks. It grabs you by the spine and shakes you awake, even before your brain knows why you're afraid. It wasn't a cry of pain. It wasn't even a cry for help. It was something older, wiser. A sound that told me something was terribly wrong. I scrambled out of bed, heart hammering in my throat. My legs tangled in the sheets and I nearly hit the floor. Barefoot and barely breathing, I dashed through the hallway of the little cottage I'd rented 3 months ago, tripping over a torn plush squirrel my dogs never touched anymore. It was still dark outside, but the kitchen was dimly lit by the porch light seeping through the window. That's when I saw him, Rusty, just Rusty, sitting completely still by the door, as if frozen. His head tilted ever so slightly, not at me, but toward the trees beyond the glass. His ears perked, his eyes wide, haunted. I didn't see Clover. There was always supposed to be two, always, Clover and Rusty, the brothers. I'd found them during a thunderstorm, huddled together in a ditch near the edge of Highway 17, soaked and shivering. Clover had barked at me when I opened the car door. Tiny as he was, he planted himself like a little lion between me and Rusty. He'd even tried to nip at my boots, brave, reckless. Rusty, on the other hand, wouldn't even lift his head. I had to carry him into the back seat. From that moment on, they were inseparable. I used to joke they shared one soul, Rusty the body, Clover the voice. You couldn't call one without the other showing up. Clover barked, Rusty watched. Clover chased, Rusty hesitated. Together, they made sense, and, for me, they were everything. I had lost my sister Lila that summer. She was my only family. A drunk driver took her from a crosswalk one rainy afternoon, and I hadn't even answered her last text. I'd been too tired. The silence that followed her absence was suffocating. The air in my apartment got too still. My hands kept reaching for a phone that never buzzed. So I left the city, packed what I needed, found this place, old, creaky, forgotten. But it was surrounded by trees. The kind of quiet that didn't hurt quite so much. Then I found Clover and Rusty, and for a little while I could breathe again. Last night had been uneventful. Rain tapping on the roof, a breeze shifting the porch swing. I let them out late. Midnight or so. They usually took a few minutes and scratched at the door when they were done sniffing every tree trunk. Last night, only Rusty came back. Clover had darted into the woods, chasing something. I wasn't worried. He'd done that before. Always came back within 10 minutes. This time, I waited. I called. I even walked out a little, flashlight in hand. No Clover. But Rusty sat by the door, tail stiff, ears flat, whining. I figured Clover would show up by morning. He always did. But this morning, something was off. Rusty didn't jump up, didn't wag his tail. He didn't even blink. He was soaked to the bone, fur clumped together like he'd rolled in mud. One of his front paws was bleeding, just a little, but it stood out against his copper fur like spilled ink. I crouched next to him. "Rusty? Buddy?" My voice cracked. He didn't move. Just let out a tiny whimper, eyes still fixed on the woods. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to the door, nose pressed to the crack beneath it. So I opened it. Rusty stepped out like he was sleepwalking. I grabbed my coat and flashlight and followed. There were paw prints in the mud. Clover's, I assumed. They led behind the cottage down the small slope toward the creek. I stepped carefully, the ground slick from last night's rain. Rusty didn't look back once. He knew where he was going. About 50 feet down, just past the tree line, he stopped, and there, crumpled beneath the low-hanging branches of a pine, was Clover. At first, I didn't believe it was him. His body looked too still, too wrong. I rushed forward, slipping on wet leaves, heart screaming in my chest. Clover's neck was twisted unnaturally, legs splayed out like he'd been dropped. No blood, no visible wounds, no broken branches above him, no signs of a struggle. Just stillness. Still and utterly, impossibly silent. I dropped to my knees beside him. No! No, no, no! Clover. My hands hovered over his fur, not knowing whether to touch or to scream. Rusty let out that same howl again, but this time it was closer to a roar, a sound full of pain and rage and fear. It reverberated through the trees, and for a moment I thought I heard something else howl back. I turned my head toward the woods. Nothing. Just trees. But Rusty wasn't looking at Clover. He wasn't mourning. He was staring into the tree line, at something beyond what I could see. His fur stood on end. His lips curled slightly. No growl. Just that fixed, terrified gaze. I whispered, "What is it, Rusty?" He didn't answer, obviously. But he started to dig. Right there. Just beneath, where Clover's body lay. He tore at the earth with a desperation I'd never seen in him before, clumps of wet dirt flying, nails scraping, breath ragged. I watched, frozen. Something about it felt wrong. Not like instinct. Not grief. It was as if he knew something was down there, and that terrified me more than anything else. I carried Clover's body inside with trembling arms. He was heavier than I remembered, or maybe grief just made everything heavier. His fur, still damp, clung to my shirt. My throat burned. I laid him down gently in the old laundry basket, lined with towels, and tried to keep myself from falling apart. Rusty didn't follow. He stayed outside by the dirt he had frantically dug into earlier. Just sitting there, unmoving, his ears twitching every now and then like he was picking up a frequency I couldn't hear. His eyes never left the trees. I called for him, voice breaking. "Rusty, come inside, please." Nothing. Finally, I left. The door cracked in case he changed his mind and sat beside Clover's still body. His limbs were stiff now, eyes closed, thankfully. But even then, it felt like he was listening. Waiting. That night, the scratching started. It was faint at first. Just a light scrape from beneath the floorboards under the dog bed by the back wall. I froze where I stood in the hallway. Maybe a raccoon or a squirrel had gotten in. It wasn't unheard of out here. Still, it didn't sound like a squirrel. It sounded repetitive. Measured. Rusty growled. He had finally come inside at some point, wet paws leaving dark prints across the kitchen tile. Now, he stood stiff as a board in the living room, fur bristling, teeth bared. His growl wasn't deep. It was tight, controlled, focused. At the air. I walked toward him slowly, keeping my voice low. "What is it, boy?" He didn't look at me. He was staring at the far corner of the room, where the shadows from the bookshelf stretched longer than they should. I flicked on the lamp. Nothing there. But the scratching, it stopped the moment the light came on. Later that night, I had dreams that didn't feel like dreams. Whispers. So many whispers, all too fast to understand, circling around me like wind in a tunnel. I saw trees bending backward. I heard a child crying, a whimper turning into a wail, and Clover, alive. But not. He was staring at me through glass, paws up like he was trapped on the other side of a mirror. His tail wagged. His eyes were wrong, glassy, too still. Then he opened his mouth, and instead of a bark, a boy's voice whispered, "Help me!" I shot upright in bed, heart pounding against my ribs. Rusty was already up, standing on the mattress beside me, growling again, this time at the floor beneath us. The next morning, the wall behind the dog bed was scratched, deep claw marks. Not like a dog's playful scuffs, but frantic gouges, as if something trapped inside had been trying to get out. Paint flaked off in thin curls. The plaster underneath was splintered. I stared at it for a long time. Then I got a crowbar. I went outside, back to the patch Rusty had torn into under the pine tree. The dirt was still wet, cold against my hands. I pushed my fingers in deeper than before. Rusty stood a few feet away, watching, tail stiff, not wagging. Something smooth hit my fingertips. Bone, small. I pulled it out slowly. It wasn't a dog bone. Too short, too narrow. My stomach twisted. It was wrapped in fabric, faded, red with small cartoon cars printed on it, a child's pajama sleeve, and tucked into the hem was a tiny plastic name tag, Sammy, age 6. I stared at it until my vision blurred. I called the sheriff. He arrived half an hour later, chewing on the end of a toothpick, eyes hidden beneath mirrored sunglasses. He was casual, too casual. I handed him the tag and the bone in a sealed sandwich bag. He squinted. That takes me back. My throat was raw. You know this name? He nodded slowly. Old case. House used to be owned by some backyard breeder. Not legal, barely watched. There was a disappearance. Sammy. Little boy. They said one of the dogs turned on him, mauled him. Nothing left but a shoe, some blood. Breeder shut down. Case closed quiet. Closed? I asked, disbelieving. What happened to the dog? No idea, he said, already turning back toward his cruiser. Probably put down. Or ran off. Wasn't my case, I was just a rookie back then. Look, this bone, it's probably old, and that tag's been in the dirt for a while. You want me to file a report? I will, but don't go digging around more than you need to. That was it. No warning, no investigation, just a shrug. So I did what he wouldn't. I searched the property records online, found a name, Dale Curson, the old owner. Arrested once for animal cruelty, nothing major, just a slap on the wrist. But people talk in towns like this, even if they don't report. An old thread in a forgotten pet forum led me to a comment. Don't buy from Curson. His mutts turned feral. Something wrong with him. One got loose. Kid disappeared, then all of them disappeared. They weren't just dogs, I started to think. Or they weren't only dogs. That night, I heard barking under the house. 2 barks, one, low and gravelly, one high and sharp. I couldn't breathe. Rusty pressed himself against the door to the crawl space, nose twitching furiously, whining like a puppy again. So I opened it. I crawled in. The dirt was cold, packed, but the air was thick, like it hadn't moved in years. My flashlight flickered. I kept going, the barks echoing softly ahead of me, and then I saw them, eyes, 2 glowing orbs in the dark. They blinked. I froze. My first thought, Clover. But something was wrong. His body was buried. I had carried it. I had felt it cool in my arms. But this dog looked identical. Only the eyes weren't Clover's. They were glassy, hollow, reflecting the light in a way that wasn't natural. And then it opened its mouth. The bark that came out was too high. It almost sounded human. I couldn't move. My limbs felt filled with cement. The creature stepped forward, tail raised, not wagging, but twitching. It was not Clover, then it vanished, like, literally, one moment there, the next, just empty space. I scrambled backward, banging my head against a beam, when I finally crawled out from the crawl space, breathing like I'd been drowning. Rusty was gone. I didn't sleep after Rusty disappeared. I paced the house, called his name, tore through the trees behind the cottage with a flashlight until sunrise painted the sky in pale, guilty colors. Nothing. No paw prints, no broken branches. Just silence. Until I came back inside. Back to the dog bed, the scratched wall behind it, and the hollow sound the floor made when I stepped there. A dead thump. I got the crowbar again. With every pry of the floorboards, my hands shook harder. Sweat ran down my neck despite the morning chill. I peeled back splinters of wood until I hit it. Metal, a hatch, hidden under layers of insulation and dust and rotted boards. No handle, just a small latch crusted with rust. I pulled, and it groaned open like something in the house exhaled. The smell hit me instantly. Bleach, rot, dog fur. I gagged but pushed on. There was a narrow staircase of cold, concrete steps leading down into a bunker-like space I hadn't known existed. No lights. Just thick, wet shadows and the distant sound of dripping. I descended, flashlight in hand. At the base was a long corridor. The walls were tiled halfway up, like an old kennel or veterinary lab. The tiles were stained, brown at the edges. I passed broken chains bolted into the concrete, chew toys half melted or gnawed to pulp, and then I saw them. Photos. Pinned along one wall, dozens of them. Children posing with dogs, some smiling, some caught mid-blink. But in all of them, the child's face had been crossed out. Thick black ink scratched over every smile, every pair of eyes. The dogs were untouched. Rusty's scent was strong now. I followed it down a narrow hall, past a rusted sink, past cages too small for anything living. My flashlight flickered once, then again, and the air felt charged, like something was watching, and then I heard it. A soft, pitiful whimper. "Rusty?" I called, voice cracking. Another whimper, a shuffle. I moved toward the sound, stepping over a cracked tile and around a stack of overturned crates. The door to the far room was open just enough to squeeze through. Inside was another kennel, smaller, square lined with old blankets. And in the corner? Rusty, curled in on himself, shaking. His eyes met mine, and for a second I thought he wouldn't recognize me. Then he let out a tiny, choking whine and tried to stand. But he didn't move toward me. Not yet. Because next to him was a collar. Simple. Worn. The tag read Clover. But Clover's body was still upstairs. I picked up the collar. The leather was soft. Too soft for something left untouched for years. And warm. Like it had been worn only moments ago. The room dimmed and the air shifted. Suddenly lights above flickered to life. Weak, green fluorescence blinking one by one in a line back through the corridor. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath fogged in front of me. Then a presence swept past, cold, invisible, and unmistakably there. Rusty let out a low, confused growl, and a voice followed. High, soft, childlike. Help him. Help my friend. I turned. No one behind me. But in the corner of my vision, something began to form. A shimmer. A memory caught in rewind. I saw a boy, maybe 6 years old, sitting on the concrete, arms wrapped around a puppy. A golden one, tail tucked, body pressed tight to the boy's side. The boy was crying. "They said he bit me," the voice whispered again, "but he didn't. He was trying to stop him, trying to help me. And then I saw it. Him. A man. Blurred. Distorted. Holding something sharp. The puppy lunging between the man and the boy. Barking. Not attacking. Protecting. The image faded like smoke. On the floor where the boy had sat, I now noticed a notebook wedged beneath a broken bucket. I opened it. The pages were warped and moldy, but I could still read enough. It was a journal. The breeder's notes scrawled in a rushed, erratic hand. Specimen 7 shows signs of precognition. Alerted seconds before noise stimulus. Pairing the litter with children increases emotional compliance. Sammy 2 attached to 9A. Intervention required. Staged incident successful. Child presumed dead. 9A terminated. Facility. Cleared. Terminated. But something went wrong. Because something stayed behind. Rusty shifted closer now, his side pressing against my leg. He was trembling, but not like he wanted to flee, like he was waiting. I took the collar from the ground. The moment I did, the lights flickered again. Rusty stood. He walked. Only when I held the collar. We made our way back up the corridor, past the silent photos, the walls that felt like they were breathing, the scratch marks inside the very foundation of the house. Just before we reached the stairs, I heard the voice again. "Don't forget him!" I turned, but the corridor was empty. No boy, no puppy. Just the quiet hum of electricity struggling to stay lit. Back upstairs, daylight felt alien, like too much of the night had followed me home. I placed the collar on the table beside Rusty's untouched bowl of food, and then it moved, slightly, like something had nudged it. I picked it up again. It was warm, and then, just once, it pulsed in my palm, like a heartbeat. That night I dreamed of Clover. Not the broken body I'd carried inside, not the distorted shadow I'd seen under the house. He was whole. His fur shone golden under a sky the color of ash and stars. He stood in a field of tall grass that whispered instead of rustled. He looked at me, eyes bright but waiting, and behind him a boy, small, barefoot, watching. I woke up gasping. The dream clung to me like fog. I looked over at Rusty, curled at the foot of my bed. His head lifted when I moved, his ears perked. The collar was on my nightstand, still warm, still pulsing. It wasn't just Clover's, it was a tether to Sammy, to Clover's soul, to the lie that had buried them both, one in the ground and one in the shadows beneath it. I had to finish it. That morning, I wrapped the collar in a soft towel, tucked it under my jacket, and walked with Rusty to the place. Where I'd found Clover, the wind was wrong, too fast, too sharp. The trees leaned like they were listening, or warning. The grave was still fresh. I knelt, and Rusty stood beside me, still as stone. I held the collar in both hands. "Clover," I whispered. "You were good. You saved someone." My voice cracked. "You didn't do what they said, and I'm sorry you had to carry that," Rusty whined softly. I kissed the collar and placed it into the dirt. The wind stopped. Dead silence. Then, the earth shivered, a tremble, subtle but deep. The collar sank slowly on its own like something beneath was pulling it home. And when the last edge disappeared, beneath the soil, he appeared. Clover. But not the one I'd buried. This Clover was radiant, whole. Every hair gleaming in the half-light, eyes glowing like warm amber. He padded forward silently, nudged Rusty gently with his nose, licked my trembling hand, and then turned, walked into the trees, and vanished. Not violently, not suddenly, just gone. Like fog in morning sun. Rusty let out a soft bark, once, and sat beside me. We stayed there, until the wind returned, this time soft, gentle, almost like a lullaby rustling through the trees. In the weeks that followed, things changed, not drastically, but meaningfully. Rusty stopped growling at shadows. He played again, wrestled with his old toys, ate with energy. He still sat by the window every evening, but not with fear, just watchfulness. Sometimes he'd bark once, then curl back into sleep. Started lighting a candle each night, one for Clover, one for Sammy. The house felt lighter. The scratches never came back. The cold spots disappeared. Even the forest outside the cottage felt less haunted. Still, I thought of them constantly, of the photo wall, the scratched-out faces, the buried journal. How many other stories like theirs had been erased? Then, one morning, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, in blocky handwriting. Inside was a single photo. I nearly dropped it. It was Clover, But not my Clover. Younger. His face wasn't muddied by blood or shadow or fear. He looked vibrant, alert, and sitting beside him, arms around his neck, was a boy. Sammy. They were in front of the kennel I had torn apart. There was joy in the photo, real joy, on the back, written in faded blue ink. Thank you for setting him free. Sammy, 2007. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it beside the candles. Rusty nudged my leg and sighed. I scratched behind his ears and whispered, "Some dogs guard houses, some guard hearts," and in the quiet that followed, I said it again, just to myself. But mine guarded a secret.